Let me make sure it is recording. That problem that we still don't know what. Okay, it's there. Okay. Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock. It's time to begin. Welcome to our MELS 601 class. This is week 5. I was thinking today, you are actually pretty much, you are 1/3 complete this semester. It's hard to believe already. And I was also thinking, it may not be the best analogy in the world, but, I mentioned last week to some of you about, surviving boot camp. If you went into the military, after 6 weeks, then, they say that you can make it into the Army. So after next week, I guess you are official. After next week, we will have reached our benchmark. But overall, I will have to say that overall, almost all of you are doing very, very well in this program. I've been very, very pleased with things. Just very quickly, I just want to go over what the plans are for this evening. We are looking at week 5 in Blackboard, and if you will look at the assignment section, this is actually what will be due to your instructors by Sunday night. Again, this past week, you submitted the APSL Task 2 as a draft. We have provided you feedback, or you will be getting feedback if that has not been finished. And remember that those will be due as a completed project to your instructor this coming Sunday night, and it should be ready to be submitted for a final grade. In addition to that, your APSL Task 3 peer review, 2 of them will be due in the assignment Dropbox as well. Let me remind you, and take your time and look at carefully at where you are submitting these documents. Some are accidentally, and I know it's an accident, going over into the APTEL section. And when that happens, then Dr. Crawford and I have to spend a lot of time cleaning up those kinds of things, because we have to actually go into the system, we have to take it out, and then we have to go back into the system. We have to so it's a lot of extra work on us if this happens. So please take time and make sure that you are submitting it in the proper place. And then due this coming Sunday night, your Zoom team, if you have not done that, your Zoom team should meet this week. There should be someone that has been appointed to be in charge of that. But your task 1 and 2 combined, your video link of where you have gone in and you have had a scholarly discussion of the APSL. Now remember, I said task 1 and 2, but it doesn't matter. Dr. Crawford and I will accept anything that you want to talk about as long as it is related to the development of the APSL. You can look at task 3, task 4, and look on into task 5. I don't care, and Dr. Crawford doesn't care. We're just saying that those are 2 that will have been fully completed, and they will have been graded. But if you need to talk about some other things, then we're okay with that as well, as long as it is, you stay on task with the APSL. Remember, whoever is in charge of this, they will upload it. It will be turned into a YouTube video. There will be a link. They will be responsible for sending that link to each of the Zoom team members. And although it is the same, each of you will be required to submit it in Blackboard for a grade, for you to get your credit for the Zoom team, for the Zoom team participation. Now, please be reminded, you may look at that, and let's just say, for instance, and I'm looking at her right now, let's just say that Chaka is the first one in her team to send the video in. Well, if I look at Chaka's, and then I know who else is in her team, then I don't have to look at the other videos because it's the same video. So if you send it in and you get quick feedback on it, that is because I have already looked at it, or Dr. Crawford would have already looked at it based on another student in that team. Because if there's 5 people in the team or 4 people in the team, we only need to look at it one time, but we need it submitted, each one of you submitted it, to submit it separately. And then on this Sunday night, and I'm going to talk about that this evening, your APSL Task 4 draft will be due to Blackboard's discussion board. So just as a reminder, this is what we will be looking at, week 5, we will be looking at on Sunday of this week. With that in mind, let me move this on over. Scroll on down. Let me go ahead and get to my place, and then I will do some reminders. I saw Dr. Hamilton, you did make it on time, didn't you? Okay.
I did. Spoke to no parents on the way out. Just ran on out.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. Dr. Crawford, are you with us yet?
Okay. I am. Good evening.
Okay. Okay. Hey, I just want to make sure that I didn't call on you and I didn't see you. Okay. Okay. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm making it.
Okay. As a reminder, and I'm not going to go back over task 3. Dr. Crawford and I have spent a lot of time with task 3 over the weekend. That was pretty much that was our weekend looking at that. As a reminder, just remember, those of you that are having to make corrections with that there, with prompt 1, you're doing 2 things. You are doing a literature review, and those are the best practices based on what your identified problem is. And then you are doing an annotated bibliography. Remember, with your annotated bibliography, that there is that you must have 8 citations. 5 of them must be regular citations. 3 of them are going to be technology and research-based programs. And Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Shepherd, and Dr. Crawford, all 3 chimed in last week and gave you good examples of those kinds of programs. I would say 95% of you were on point when you turn your work in this week. The others of you, you need to go back, if necessary, you need to go back and review the video from last week. It's under week 4. And all of this is well explained in that video. A few of you failed to realize that with task 3, that there are 2 prompts. You turned in prompt 1, but then when you got to prompt 2, there was nothing down there. So you've got to remember that there is a prompt 1, there is a prompt 2, and both of them must be submitted at the same time. Another reminder, if you are doing a literature review and with your annotations, that automatically tells you that there's going to be a reference section, APA. Now, with the discussion board, you may not have had an opportunity to have met with your PLC at that time. But when you submit it as a final product for evaluation, there should be an appendices, and in the appendix section, there should be proof that you have met with your PLC with an agenda and/or minutes. So that is just a reminder of what we will be looking for with task 3 when it is finally submitted this week. And many of you have already cleared that, so you know that is great. Which brings us to task 4. And I'm going to ask you again, as I have each week, to listen, put your hands down and listen, or just or take notes or whatever you need to do, but hold your questions until this has been fully discussed. If there's something that you really, really need to ask, then again, the instructors will check that, but just let's don't chase rabbits. Let's listen, okay? Okay, in task 4, listen carefully. The candidate will lead the PLC in the research and development of an action plan proposal to present to the administrative team. Now, there's a lot in that one sentence. You're going to lead, you're going to develop an action plan, and you're going to present to the administrative team. This tells you again what you've got to do right there, your instructions. But I'm going to go ahead and get right on down to the meat of what is expected of you. Let's look at prompt 1. Now, when you see prompt number 1, that means that there's going to be a prompt number 2 somewhere. Okay, so know that there's going to be 2 places that you've got to address work. In prompt number 1, the candidate will lead the PLC in the research and development of an action plan to strategically address the most pressing need that must include, but not limited to, the following. Okay, now it says right there that you must include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 areas right there. Every one of them must be addressed, but there can be more. There can be less than that, but there can be more than that. Well, what am I going to do, Dr. Stedman? Okay, do you see this right here? The importance of the action plan research base. That is going to be after you have included your prompt instructions and everything. That is going to be your first heading. You're going to write it in bold-faced letters, taking the yellow out when you submit it. But you're going to write in bold-faced letters the importance of the action plan research base. And guess what you're going to do under that? What does yellow say that you're supposed to do? You're supposed to write something. That is where narrative work comes in. So under that, the important, okay, you're going to talk about what is an action plan as it is research-based. What is an action plan? What does a good action plan look like? You know, again, there's some mini research in there. It's research-based, so there's many research in there, so there should be some references. I'm not going to tell you how many. You determine how many based on when you feel that you have comfortably addressed that area. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to, let me see. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to come back to it and pray that I don't lose it. I'm going to minimize that. Because I want to go somewhere. Okay, here I am. Let's go to your APSL template and materials. Now, we told you we would be providing you with a lot of support this first semester. Under that section, I want you to look. Dr. William R. Daggett, Successful Schools, From Research to Action Plans. I want you to look. Dr. William R. Daggett, Successful Schools, From Research to Action Plans, Successful Schools 605. They're examples of a school-wide literacy action plan. All of this, there is embedded with all kinds of just research-based information, what an action plan is. Now, why did we put it there? Because we wanted to give you some information that would give you a head start. You can use any of this information that you want to. Let me just click on this one just to show you what I'm talking about. Okay. Essential components of an effective literacy action plan. this basically, when you read this, it takes you step by step into how to develop an action plan, what it should consist of, what it looks like. And this is based on some of the best research that you'll find out there. Some of the best research that is out there. So avail yourself to all of this information. Before you even get started, you need to read every bit of this information. I probably would download it and I would highlight it. I would make notes on it. I would say, I'm going to include this in my work. You know, everything. There's lots of help there, lots of help. So just know that we have put that there as a way of giving you a good head start That is not where I wanted to go. This is where I want to go. Okay. So the importance of the action plan research base. Again, this is going to be another literature review, and we've given you lots of resources that you can pull from already. Do you have to use them? No. But I would highly recommend that you use them, because, it's some of the best research that you'll find. But there's lots of other great research out there as well. When you get through with that, the next thing you're going to do, that's going to be your next heading, alignment with student learning outcomes. Okay, now what is an action plan? What is your action plan going to look like? Research based. Okay, based on that, you and the team are going to decide how is all of this going to be aligned with student learning outcomes. Now remember, you've identified there's a problem in your school. My most pressing need. Okay, and the end result is that whatever that most pressing need is, you want to move it from point A to point B. So when you are developing this action plan, this research-based action plan, how is all of this that you're doing, how are you going to align it with student learning outcomes? It's got to be apples to apples, oranges to oranges. How is it going to work together? Again, all of this is narrative work. Dr. Crawford, any of you, anytime you want to chime in on something, if you've got a comment on these as we're going along, don't hesitate just to stop me and put your 2 cents worth in there if you need to, okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thirdly, again, another topic. Once you have done your research, once you have decided how you're going to align all of this with student learning outcomes, your identified problem, you're going to say, okay, I've got to have some short-term goals and objectives. I've got to have some mid-term goals and objectives, and I've got to have some long-term goals and objectives. Now, these have got to be realistic terms and objectives. Realistic, something that you know that you can do. So you've got to decide, you and your team will decide, okay, what are the goals that we're going to strive for? What are the objectives? What can we do now? What can we do maybe a couple of months from now? And then down the road, what can we do? And I thought about this today. I used the analogy last week of a doctor, and I thought about if you're diagnosed with a sickness, and you say the short-term thing is that if you've got an infection, they're probably going to give you a high dose of penicillin to start with. So that's going to be short-term, but that may not heal whatever the problem is, but it gets you well enough that you can get started in the right direction, and then that moves toward you know, some midterm things, you know, that the doctor would diagnose that has to be done. And, you know, long-term objectives may be that you know, you may have to have extended physical therapy. You know, it may last for a long time. So you've got to decide again, what can I do now? What can I do a few weeks down the road? And then what, you know, towards the end. Dr. Crawford, any comments on that one?
No, I think I just send a quick note. SMART goals are a good place to start, and if they haven't looked at their SIP as far as, you know, where to attack or what to address, that's a good place to look at, because many of those goals are going to be written out in such a manner that they're going to be or have a head start on attacking the problem.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Shepherd, any comments on that one? Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Stop me anytime now, guys. The next one, specific activities aligned with the designated goals and objectives. Okay, now up here, you have determined short, middle, and long-term goals and objectives. Now, specific activities that are aligned with that, you know, you've determined, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What kind of activities, what kind of things are going to be in place to help you meet these goals and objectives? What are the specific activities? Activities are things that you do. The next, indicators of success with measurement techniques. Okay, now once you have identified those goals and objectives, once you have established specific activities that are aligned with the designated goals and objectives, how do you know that those activities, how do you know they're working? How can you determine that? What are going to be your indicators of success? And what are your measurement techniques are going to be? You can't just put it in there and just say it's a free-for-all. There have got to be ways of deciding whether what you are doing is working or not. And remember that that's why you have benchmark testing, because along the way you have to decide if you've got to go back to the beginning and kind of do some of your works over again, because if it's not working, you don't want to keep doing what is not working. Dr. Hamilton, you got a comment on that one?
No, but I was just thinking that like MTSS is just a good example of maybe something that's already in their schools, where you'll try something for a few weeks and then you progress monitor to just see if those specific activities really and truly are helping you meet that objective. So that like short term, like check in, is this working? Because if it's not, don't keep on doing it.
Right, right, good. And then the next one, clarification of roles and responsibilities, okay? Again, you've identified long-term goals, short-term goals, midterm goals, and objectives. You've come up with specific activities. You have developed indicators of success and measurement. Clarification, who's going to do what? And you've got to decide who's going to do what, and you've got to assign those kind of responsibilities. Again, if there's monitoring that's going to be done, somebody's got to do it. So again, anything this is attached to people, clarification of roles, and what are they going to be doing in all of this process, in the action plan process. And then finally, formative and summative assessment criteria. Now again, this is where inevitably we have to send things back, so please listen carefully to this. Formative assessment does not have one thing to do with the students. It has everything to do with the adults that are going to be implementing and working with this plan. So when you look at the formative assessment, you are looking at, okay, How do I know that the people who's supposed to be doing all this are doing what they're supposed to be doing? Okay, how is it being done with fidelity? If it's being done with fidelity, how do you know it? Who is going to be monitoring this? How is it going to be monitored to determine if the people in charge of making sure that all of this is being done is being done? You can't just say, okay, here it is, guys, and do it, and then never go back and look at it again. So formative is dealing with adults, the people, the grown people that's doing stuff. Summative assessment, again, that is the end result, and that is dealing with the students. You know, we look at, you know, is everything that we're doing, when we look at the test results, when we look at whatever we look at, you know, are those results, are we getting what we need to get? This is the end result, the summative assessment. And that is dealing with the product, who is our students. The students are our products. Okay, again, we should see, when Dr. Crawford and I look at this, we should see every one of these with detailed narrative work. Don't send me 2 or 3 sentences and think that you've done this, because I'm going to send it back and Dr. Crawford's going to send it back. You cannot do it justice with 2 or 3 sentences. A lot of thought and time need to be put into to making sure that this, because this is the meat, this is really the meat of everything that you've done so far for the APSL. Now, let's come down here. You've written all this stuff. You've narratively written this. Now, I want you to look at what's in red, and I'm going to, Dr. Lamb has already said this, but I'm going to say it again. It says choose. There's no choice here. You've got to do this graph. So this, you won't see this, another class won't see this right here because there won't be a choice. It'll come out next semester. But you must do this graphic organizer. Now, what is this? This right here is everything that you've set up there. You're putting it in an organized form. So you're taking everything that you have said and developed up here, and pretty much you are just putting it in an organized form down here so that we can see it. So it's really the same thing done twice. You're just writing about it up here and you're organizing it down here. Does that make sense? Okay. Every one of these, again, what is the activity? Timeline. When are you going to start it? When are you going to end it? Who's going to be responsible for it? What you going to need to do what needs to be done? That activity. What resources are going to be needed? Again, formative assessment method. Again, this is dealing with the adults in charge. Summative assessment method. What are we going to do to determine whether the students are successful or not? What are we going to look at? And then what goal are we looking at? You establish those goals and objectives up here. What goal are we looking at? And then how are we going to know whether it worked or not, whether it was successful? Okay? Now, that is prompt number 1. Again, you can also do the PERT chart if you have time and you want to be creative. That is entirely left up to you. That is there as an option. Prompt number 2. The candidate will share the action plan with administration. So you're going to present your action plan to the administration. You're going to do a formal presentation to them. You're going to schedule it, and your PLC team should be with you and the administrator to discuss possible implementation. You hope that what you're doing is going to mean something. You hope that what you're doing is going to be good enough that your administrator is going to say, wow, I am ready to move forward with this, and I want us to do it now. That's how good we are hoping that it's going to be. When you do that, we have prepared. Now, you've got all of this in prompt A that you're going to be able to show them. And then the discussion should include, but is not limited to, the following topics. Now, I want you to look at, now, you have to include 1, 2, 3. There are 5 areas right here. All 5 of these must be addressed. Now, notice they're in yellow, so that means what? You've got to write something. So there's your topic, building efficacy. How are you going to build efficacy amongst your staff? What are you going to do to make teachers feel better? Even students, that can be teacher efficacy, it can be student efficacy. You know, when research says that if you feel better about yourself, then you do better, right? So this is, what is teacher efficacy? What is efficacy? And then how are you going to begin building efficacy in your school? Strategies for sustained growth. It's not just good enough to do something and make the growth. How are you going to continue to keep that growth and to continue moving in the right direction? What are the strategies? When you present something, this is your marketing plan. When you go before your administrator, okay, this is what we're going to do. And, I've got my arms folded back and I'm going to say, okay, well, that's good, but how are you going to keep this going? I want you to be able to come up with the strategies, you and your team, and you're leading this. How are you going to be able to keep whatever you are proposing, how are you going to keep it going? Issues concerning diversity. Now, when you look at diversity, you're looking at diversity that can be student diversity. We've talked about the special populations, your special needs students, your AIG students, your ELL students. All of that. Those are your subgroups that you have to be very, very aware of when you are looking at overall student achievement. What are the issues concerning diversity that you face in your building, in your school? And it not only with students, you can, it could be diversity with your, there's other forms of diversity, even amongst your staff. And if it's there, you can talk about it in there. But this is mainly talking about the issues concerning diversity among the student population that you're trying to move from point A to point B. And then again, resources. What are you going to need to get all this stuff done? Are you going to need money, fiscal resources? Are you going to need human resources? Naturally, you talk about all of those, mainly human and fiscal resources in there. What is it going to take to do what needs to be done? And then establishing a shared vision of learning. That should be the culmination of what you are talking about. When I do all this, you are the leader. How are you going to take a lead role in helping to establish, getting everybody to buy in to what you are doing, getting everybody to say, yes, I want to be a part of this, and getting everybody to do what they need to do to help make this action plan actually be successful. That is task 4. I'm letting you sit there and think just a second. It looks like a whole lot, but I promise you, once you get started, you're going to find out that you already have thought about, and you've done a lot of this in the development of task 1, 2, and 3, because all of this had to be discussed at some point, when you were building those other tasks. But now again, I hope you're beginning to see how all of this comes together. There are 6 evidences throughout this program. We began with what our main product is, and that's our students. And we're looking at what can we do to improve academic achievement in our schools. That is the beginning of any school improvement plan. Am I right, Dr. Shepard?
Absolutely. And as I look at a lot of these,
go ahead.
A lot of these things you can't have without the other. They build off one another. So if you're looking at them in a lot of different separate manners, saying, I got to be able to accomplish this and this and this, when you accomplish a handful of those tasks, you've essentially accomplished the other if you break it down in a logical manner, because they build off one another, and that's important to realize when you're making a plan, in any action plan. You guys are all smart people, and so when you're developing a plan and implementing it, you have to be able to monitor that plan. Those are some of your goals: midterm, long-term, short-term. You want to be able to have a shared vision. You're not going to be able to accomplish any goal in any school unless you've created a culture of shared vision. How did you do that? How do you do that in your PLC? So you're going to have to build on these things and see that they're all cohesively intertwined, and not see them as one separate entity and the next. Otherwise, you will get overwhelmed. But once you see the big picture and start to break them down and say, I've accomplished a lot of these tasks by implementing a very cohesive plan, you'll be able to put a lot of this in narrative form and take care of it.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Dr. Crawford, any comments on this?
No, I just got a question from one of the classmates. They're concerned about the time it may take to put all together, and I was just going to answer back to him. When you look at everything you've done in task 1, 2, and even 3, a good chunk of this actually already exists real time. Now, if you're getting hung up on when exactly you're going to present this to the team and getting that put together, then that's something we can work with you on, because you got to work around people's schedule. And as I've said on a couple of occasions, as a principal, this is absolutely the worst time of year for us. I despise February to June. I do. I hate the entire 4 months. I hate it. But so don't get hung up on, it's a big part of what you got to get done. But I think once you start constructing this process, you're going to find that a good chunk of it you already have. And then once you do that, it won't be nearly, once you realize that and start pulling for what you already have, it won't be nearly as daunting as it may look.
Right, and remember, students, you're developing it this week. You don't have to present it this week. You're going to be turning it in for us to review it this week, but we would not have expected you to have presented it to your administration. That will come after we say it's good enough for you to present to them. So you will not present it this week. You're going to turn it into us for us to evaluate. Just basically, is it good enough? For you to present to your administration. So it won't go before administration this week. Does that make sense? Okay.
And it says that, but again, this is kind of, you want to turn it in for us to get eyes on it. You won't have to worry about presenting it this week. So don't stress about trying to lock your principal down for a meeting on a plan that you're still putting together just this week.
Yeah, we're going to give you feedback on it, and then that will come the next week. You may want to go ahead and let them know that it's coming so that they can go ahead and start looking at another week and building it into their schedule, but not this week. Okay. Dr. Hamilton, anything before we move on this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. Well, that gets us through task 4. Just a reminder, next week I will introduce to you task 5. I will introduce to you next week the process for doing your case studies. And I think that's all I needed to say about the work that we've got to do at this point. We're going to just a reminder. Dr. Lamb mentioned last week that you should have your TaskStream accounts. If you do not, and you're having problems with TaskStream, just remember he told you to reach out to Seth Apria at Gardner-Webb University and let him know that you're having problems if you are having problems. And the test is, if you can get into TaskStream, we ask you to go ahead with the semester 1, and we ask you to go ahead and to do your School of Ed disposition, and that lets us know that your TaskStream is working okay. There's a few of you that still have not done that, so I would ask you to go into TaskStream and take care of that if you have not taken care of that. And if you are having problems with TaskStream, then reach out to Seth Apria at Gardner-Webb University, and he can help take care of that. We're going to shift gears at this time, and I am going to turn it over to Dr. Crawford, who is going to spend the next few minutes talking to you about some of the topics that you will have read in some of the literature review and in your textbook reading, but he's going to just pinpoint some of these things and look at it from more or less from his role as a principal, and make it more relevant. The reading that you've done, make it more relevant to what the life and the role of a principal is. So Dr. Crawford's going to talk to us over the next few minutes, about no, I'm in the wrong place. Not micropod. That's
eval versus coaching.
Yes. I was looking at week 6. I was giving away next week what you got to do. Go ahead, Dr. Crawford.
Yeah, so just real briefly, ladies and gents, one of the most difficult things that you will have trouble distinguishing in your role as a principal, and because others will have difficulty making that distinction, is your role as an evaluator versus your role as a coach. For those of you who didn't know, North Carolina each year needs between 3,000 and 4,000 new teachers to fill holes in open positions across the state. And just data from the 16 university schools, we're only graduating anywhere between 400 and 600. So the bottom line is we're not graduating enough teachers to fill the holes that we have, and I'm sure Dr. Shepard and Dr. Hamilton will tell you, will chime in about how difficult it is with hiring sometimes. So one of the things you got to make clear in your building is your role as an evaluator versus your role as a coach. So right now I've got a small staff to begin with, but about 20% of my staff are first-year teachers, and about half of those are in tested grade levels in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So just by virtue of that, with first-year teachers, I got to spend a lot of time with those folks coaching. Now, research says you're not supposed to both coach and evaluate, but public education has done a pretty miserable job of tossing that right out the window, and so you're in a position where you will have to do both. Evaluation is what you do, based on North Carolina General Statute 115C. For those of you that don't know, that's largely the education statute. And when it comes to evaluation, you will pretty much live with 115C 325. That pretty much outlines everything you will have to do. How to dismiss a career teacher for those that even have a tenure status. But coaching is something very, very different. And as there are any number of books and PDs you can take to talk about coaching, but coaching is what you pour into folks to get them where you need to be. So I mentioned earlier that I have 5 first-year teachers. I make the assumption that first-year teachers know less to nothing. And I based that on myself as a first-year teacher at one point. Coaching is about giving direct support so that that teacher can get from point A to point B. And I guess the best way for me to illustrate the value of, when I was the principal of the Math and Science School, high school in Charlotte, I hired a young social studies teacher. This gentleman had charisma. He was great with kids. He had that part down very, very naturally. When I went to do his very first observation, 5 minutes in, it was a hot mess. And that's even after going over the pre-conference and kind of talking through what we was going to do. And so at that point, I decided to just kind of stop the observation process. But I stayed in the classroom the entire lesson, took great notes, and I was able to have a great conversation with him after the observation. And we talked about some things that he could have done differently. Just kind of really let him hit reset to go on to the next, so I can go back and redo his first observation. A couple of years later, I have to tell you, it was with great pride that I was able to look. He sent me a text from Raleigh when he was selected as the 2014 North Carolina Teacher of the Year. I'm talking about James Ford. Now, certainly, I cannot take credit for everything that he has done. He was a phenomenal person with kids to begin with. It's very natural to him. But with first-year teachers in particular, how they start and what you allow them to do to begin with is largely what they will continue to do throughout their career. And being able to kind of catch a lot of those bad habits with that first observation, and by changing it from an evaluative piece to just kind of stepping back and say, okay, let's go back and retool this, and coaching him through what I thought he could change, I think set him on the right path. Now, there was another principal after me. Again, he certainly has not a lot of natural talent, but I know I was able to get him started off on the right foot, and he was able to take it from there. And so you will find that your opportunities to coach folks as opposed to always having to evaluate them, you will find that, at least for me, far, far more valuable. Because again, we're not making nearly enough teachers to fit, not to fill in holes in our classrooms. As a superintendent once told me, we're not going to fire our way to excellence, and so we got to find a way to deal with the folks that we have, and that's where you coach them. Now, will you have to have different conversations with different folks? Absolutely. This is my 16th, 17th year as a building level principal, and those conversations never get easier. But I go into them if I have to, knowing that at that point, I have poured everything of myself into a person with regard to coaching. So whenever you get the opportunity to coach, whether it's your coaching, whether you teach teacher leaders how to coach, whether you teach or evaluate your assistant principals how to coach, when you get to that position, that is where you really want to spend your time and where you want to live. And I think, ultimately speaking, that is how you're going to develop efficacy, how you're going to develop culture. Evaluations are going to be there. They're mandated by law. Going to get 3-year and peers and all that. That's all spelled out in 115C. Coaching, however, is not spelled out. It's something that you will have to feel your way through. But once you do, and once you find something that works for you and your administrative team as you build it, you will find, at least for me, it is it's the most rewarding part of the job. So that's kind of what I had. And if anybody has any questions, please shoot them to me. There's not really one handbook. Each school is different. Each school system is different. Each structure is different. And once you learn those, then you simply learn to work around that. But better to spend your time coaching early than have to evaluate out later.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. Very, very good. Very good advice, students. The next thing is that we're going to talk about is what you're going to find yourself over the next year as you're going through this program, and you're probably already beginning to think about that. You will find yourself emerging into the type of leader that you are going to be when you become an assistant principal, when you become a principal. And the principals that are already in that role, they will tell you that a lot of it is, our life experiences most of the time determine how we act, what we say, what we do. Then your training is going to have a great contribution to who you're going to become. And then you will find yourself, based on the situations, you're going to find yourself, it changes sometimes based on whatever you're dealing with. So this semester, we are just going to basically introduce to you that there are many different types of leadership. We're going to talk about a couple of those. Next semester, it will be a little bit more, but when you get to 605, your last semester, that is when we really get into the types of leadership and the role that you will need to play as you are moving into that administrative role. So at this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Hamilton if she would share with you some of her expertise and relate it to your role as a principal to Dr. Hamilton, the attributes of transformational leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Stedman. So the first thing I'm going to do is just piggyback on Dr. Crawford and say, as a transformational leader, coaching is a way to really help transform teaching, transform teachers, and that equates to transforming learning, student learning, and student success. So it's very important. So when we think about transformational leadership, think about, well, what is a transformation? Well, that means to create change in appearance, form, or character or shape, to create something that's better than what currently exists. There's never a perfect school, a perfect lesson, a perfect teacher, or a perfect principal. There's always room to grow and improve. And I always say I don't ever want to reach my pinnacle, because once you're at the pinnacle, there's only one way to go, down. So I don't want to ever get there. So as the leader of a school, how can you transform your school? How can you enhance or reshape your school, or the culture or the climate of your school, or the perceptions others have of your school? I would offer that if you consistently do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, and don't ask others to do something you aren't willing to do, you'd be well on your way to being a transformational leader. Karina Allen from Developing Strategic Leaders says that transformational leaders serve to transform our lives for the better. Their very decisions and judgments are planted with a premise that how others are impacted matters most, what others benefit matters most, and how high others can be elevated matters most, and whether others can be empowered is what matters most. So Todd Whitaker, who's one of my favorite principal authors, in the book, What Great Principals Do Differently, 18 Things That Matter Most, describes some of these attributes of transformational leadership in practice. And some of those include staying focused on what matters most, focusing on people and relationships instead of programs, knowing yourself and being able to monitor yourself, treating everyone with respect every day, all the time. And I would add to that, treating people with respect to their faces and to their backs.
Amen.
Consistently exhibiting a calm, positive, and professional demeanor, because as Todd Whitaker says, when the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold. So just as a little personal addition to this, about 12 years ago, the assistant principal and I, that I had at the time, were standing out in the car drop-off line one morning, and she was reporting something that had occurred in the school that was just at that moment horrible. And today I can't even remember what it was. But at any rate, because there's always something else to take over. But we were standing out there and we were talking, and I guess we had very serious looks on our faces. And shortly after school began that day, I began getting phone calls from parents wanting to know what was wrong, what was wrong. Well, all these parents had ridden through the car line and they had seen this serious, like, concerned look on our faces. And so they took that to perceive something was wrong. And when they feel like something's wrong, then something is wrong. So the joke ever since has been, we'll stand in the car line just waving and smiling and saying, oh, yeah, that teacher put tape on that child's mouth. Sure did. Yeah, sure did. That's a joke now, but just the way we get, you do have to have that appearance of calm, positive, and professional 24/7. Base every decision on your best teachers. Treat everyone like you would treat your best teacher. Have high expectations for your staff and higher expectations for yourself. Deal with negative staff members and take responsibility, and don't place blame on others like central office or people like that. So many transformational leaders will have guiding principles as a framework for their staff to work under. Some of these could include: there are no neutral interactions, make them all great. Focus on the children, make the children and their learning your top priority. Work hard, be kind. When you're at work, you're at work. Make every child feel valued and important. Provide optimal customer service. And be a forest person, not a tree person, because in this business, it's not about me. It's not about one teacher or one classroom. Oftentimes, it's not even about my school. Sometimes it's about the district, and sometimes it's about the state. Oftentimes, schools have the big things in place, creating a perception that transformation maybe doesn't need to occur. But that's when a true transformational leader should begin looking at the nuances of the little things to continue moving the school on a positive trajectory. Bambrick and Santoyo, in their book, Leverage Leadership, provides an analogy with the wear and tear on the tires on our car. They write, on a day-to-day basis, the slight damage to our tires are invisible to the untrained eye. Over time, however, this slight warping adds up to the point when months down the line, a car may be markedly slower or brake more poorly than it did when our tires were new. That's the same as a school culture. The more developed it is, the easier it can be to overlook creeping problems. That's a big attribute of transformational leadership, making sure the culture or learning isn't wearing away right beneath our noses without us noticing. These same authors also remind us that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Know yourself, know your true north, and stick with what you know is the right thing for students, staff, and your school community. Verbalize and share your guiding principles, and let others see how your guiding principles, or non-negotiables, support the belief of the school-wide community. Let them see you walk the walk. As the leader, you are the single variable in transformational change.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. And last but not least, Dr. Shepherd is going to talk with us about the attributes of situational leadership.
Thank you. And I think a lot of the situational leadership that any principal is going to face, or administrator, or school administrator is going to face, wherever you are, is going to fall in line where you believe and how you act as a transformational leader. You know, how your situational leadership is going to be hand in hand with your school vision and your overall who you are. So if you break it down in a couple of ways, and I'll piggyback on a couple of things of what they've said. If you look at any coaching situation, if you look at instruction, which a lot of your conversations are going to be just that, if you're leading a successful school, are going to be about the instruction, because that is the single most important thing happening in your class or in your school every day, or what happens in the classrooms. And if you're there not to see it, and if you're not there to be able to give proper feedback on it, then you're not going to be able to really diagnose or measure the temperature in your building on a single day. So the coaching And the growth of instruction is going to be a really important part of any leadership philosophy that you have. It always comes back to growth. If you're writing anything down, something that I kind of live by when it comes to instructional leadership, when it comes to coaching, it's really this. If you want folks to grow, or if you want them to grow professionally, if you want folks to grow instructionally, or if you want to grow yourself, if you think back to a time when you grew yourself, what was there? What happened when you grew? Sometimes it meant, and a lot of times it meant that you were uncomfortable, okay? And when you were uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, and you had the proper amount of support and leadership around you, it really led to growth. So I think a lot of coaching and a lot of situational leadership when it comes to instruction comes from a healthy amount of pressure and support. If you have a good combination of support as a leader, giving direction, multiple people in your building, replicating those great teachers in your building, collaboration within your building, giving a healthy amount of support, and then the pressure to grow, and sometimes that means it's uncomfortable for folks. If you give a healthy amount of pressure and support, I think it always equals growth in the end. And that's going to be a good coaching philosophy that I've seen really have a positive effect on any of my leadership and when it comes to our team, which leads me to the kind of the next part of it. I think any situational leadership in any role that you are in as an administrator, for me personally, if I bring it back to me personally, it is a teamwork job. You cannot do it all on your own. It's impossible. Just in this 1 hour that we spent together, I will give you an example. And Dr. Stebbins says, relate it back to your job right now. Relate it back to what you're doing. If you think you can do it all on your own, you're mistaken. In 1 hour that we've been here, I had an event going on in the cafeteria where we're doing a fundraiser for our backpack program for our needy students. You have senior night going on. You have basketball game. I had a student pass out in the concession stand line out here. And then on the way in, I had to get vehicles moved for the MS to get in. You can't do all of those things on your own. You have to work together as a team. And that's one example of one singular event out of school on any given night. And that happens every single day, multiple times a day. And a lot of you guys have experience with that. So it really goes back to surrounding yourselves with individuals who you can trust, that you've empowered. That's a really important part of a principle. If you want to be a good leader, as a transformational leader, you have to be able to empower those people around you to do their job. You can't micromanage everything that they do. They're going to make mistakes, and you have to be okay with that. Let's be a part of your situational leadership, is to verbalize to folks, it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. Let's figure out how to work through it together. And that's, again, part of that pressure and support for you to have the expectation that people branch out, that you trust them to do their job, to handle it, and that you're there behind them if they do fail, to pick them up together. And you will build a very strong, cohesive team where you can trust one another and you can help one another through any given situation in the school. That's a big part of situational leadership, is being able to build a team that you can trust and that you've granted respect to, and that you treat each other as professionals, and that you've given them tasks to do around you that are important to the school. If the school as a whole sees you as a leader and your team as a center part of that, and that they can all look at you together as a cohesive group, your school is only going to be more powerful, moving students forward and be more successful. So empowering others with teamwork, empowering others with a shared vision is really important. And I think you do those three things through a couple things that Dr. Hamilton mentioned. And the first one is building relationships. You know, any situational leadership position that you're going to be put in, or your philosophy, is always going to go back to the relationships that you are having with the people you're involved in. And so if you've spent the time by making deposits, healthy deposits on a daily basis, if you think about a bank account, you're making emotional deposits on a daily basis. And how do you do that as a leader? You're walking around in the morning before school starts, and you're going door to door, and you're asking, you know, Miss Bratu, how's her daughter doing? I know you were sick last week. How's things going? How can I help you in this situation? Or the new teacher, how are they doing today? I know you were struggling with this, and we spoke about that. How can I help support you? What are some questions? You're making emotional deposits daily. So when you have to have a critical conversation with them, there is trust and there's respect. That's situational leadership. And it all goes back to the relationships that you have with the adults in your building. And you're building that by making positive emotional bank account. You know, you're gonna make clean deposits, because sooner or later you're gonna make a withdrawal. And when you make a withdrawal, and you have a critical conversation with them, there's going to be that trust. And you've got to do that by building positive relationships every day. So building trust, having respect for one another, being kind. And being kind doesn't mean you're easy on people. That's not true. People think, well, you have to be nice to people. You have to be kind to people. You can be kind and be critical. You can be kind and treat people as professionals. You can do that, and you should do that on a daily basis, because as a leader, you have to have critical conversations with people. You have to have those conversations on a daily basis, but you can be kind doing it. And that's treating people with respect. And that's treating people with a relationship that you've made a lot of deposits with. So I'll give you a couple of resources, and I'll send these to Dr. Stedman to send out. Here's one called Critical Conversations. If you're not good at that, this is a great book for you. I had an assistant principal who wasn't great at it, and I helped them grow through this book. If you haven't heard of it, it's called Crucial Conversations. I'll get the information to you. If you find yourself lacking in that area and you're saying, I'm not really sure how to have these conversations, if you haven't practiced them, something I do with my staff a lot, especially new assistant principals and my staff, is we have those conversations together. I model for them how that conversation is going to go, and we practice that conversation together. And then when they need to have that conversation with a teacher, I'm there with them. We walk through that conversation. Or I'll bring them in my office when I'm having that conversation with a teacher or someone else, an adult in the building, and they're sitting in the corner taking notes. And so that's a great way to have it, but you need some great literature for you. And also, taking the people who are in your building and figuring out how to multiply their strengths. Again, it goes back to empowerment and team building, that teamwork and collaboration in that respect. How do you do that? If you're the only one in your building trying to lead, you're doing it wrong. Everyone has to lead from where they are. And if you're figuring out how to get people to lead from the back, the middle, and the front, then your organization is going to move forward. A great resource for you, if you've never heard of it, it's a book called The Multiplier Effect. And it's about how to empower your staff, help them learn their strengths, and help them move forward. So it's a great book. I'll give you some pointers on that one too. It's called The Multiplier Effect by Wiseman, Allen, and Foster. So I'll give those to Dr. Stedman to send out to you guys. But that's some ideas I can give you on situational leadership.
Well, thank you so much. And when I receive that information, I will place it under week 5 in Blackboard. And Dr. Crawford, I'll send it to you so you can place it in your classes as well. So we'll place it under week 5 for you to refer back to it. Well, we've gone a little bit over our time, but it's been time well spent. We have covered a lot over the last hour. You've been given a lot of great information. As a reminder, there will not be a Zoom class on Thursday night, so use this as an opportunity, to get work done. You've got a lot to do, so we will not be infringing on your time. So, don't say it's a free night. Use it as a time, to wisely to get your work done. And as another reminder, and I don't know how it got out there several times, but just as a reminder, next Wednesday, Dean Bull over the School of Education at Gardner-Webb University is going to come online, and he's going to do us, Dr. Lamb called it the State of the Union address. He's going to talk about the education department and the role of education at Gardner-Webb University. You've been given that information already. It's in each of your Blackboard courses. And just as a reminder, between 7 and 8 o'clock next week, please try to join in. Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Shepard, I'll send you that information so that you'll have it as well so you can join. But thank all of you for everything. Instructors, thank you for the great, great input tonight. A lot of great information. And with that in mind, Dr. Crawford, you have the benediction. Anything?
Guys, work hard. Have a great week.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.